"Daddy, why does dinner feel better back here?" Nathan Cole stopped in the doorway of the restaurant kitchen, and for several seconds, the billionaire father could not find an answer. His 8-year-old daughter, Ellie, was sitting at a small stainless steel table beside a young waitress, smiling over a bowl of tomato soup as if she had discovered something far more valuable than anything waiting in the elegant dining room. "Ellie, what are you doing?" Nathan asked. "Eating." "I can see that." "Then why are you asking?" The waitress lowered her eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "I am sorry, Mr. Cole." She asked if she could sit with me for a few minutes. Nathan looked at his daughter, then at the untouched plate of expensive food he had ordered for her. A 12-ounce steak sat beneath a silver warming cover. Mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, and a sparkling glass of apple juice remained exactly as they had arrived. The meal had cost more than some families spent on groceries for an entire week. Ellie had barely looked at it. Yet here, in a narrow kitchen filled with the warm smell of bread, garlic, and fresh coffee, she looked completely at ease. Nathan stepped inside. He was 39, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, white shirt, and polished shoes. In the dining room, people knew him as the billionaire founder whose name appeared in business magazines and on glass office towers. But his daughter had never cared about any of that. She cared about whether he listened when she talked. "Who is your friend?" Nathan asked. The waitress gave a small, uncertain smile. "Hannah." Ellie answered before she could. "Her name is Hannah Reed." Hannah looked at Ellie with surprise. "You remembered." "Of course I did." Nathan glanced toward the kitchen clock. "Hannah, do you have a break right now?" "For another 15 minutes. "Then I am sorry for interrupting it." Hannah looked at him carefully. "You are not interrupting." Ellie pushed an empty chair toward her father. "Daddy, sit." Nathan looked at the chair. "Here." "Yes." "In the kitchen?" Ellie nodded as if the question made no sense. "That is where we are." Hannah tried not to smile. Nathan sat down. The chair was simple, slightly worn, and much less comfortable than the leather seats in his private office. Somehow he preferred it. Ellie picked up her spoon. "Hannah told me why the soup tastes better." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because nobody is trying to make it fancy." Hannah laughed softly. Nathan looked at his daughter. It was the first genuine laugh he had heard from her in days. Maybe weeks. He suddenly remembered all the dinners he had planned for her. Private rooms. Expensive menus. Quiet tables. Reservations made weeks ahead. Every detail perfect. Yet Ellie had spent the entire evening looking toward the kitchen. "Why did you want to come back here?" he asked. Ellie hesitated. Then she looked at Hannah. "Because she talked to me." Nathan felt something shift inside him. "I talked to you. You asked me questions. What is the difference?" Ellie looked down at her soup. "Questions are not the same as listening." The kitchen seemed to grow quieter. A cook paused near the counter. Hannah slowly set down her spoon. Nathan looked at his daughter, and for once, he did not reach for an answer. Ellie had not asked for another toy, another vacation, another expensive dinner, or another perfect afternoon. She had simply wanted a place where nobody expected anything from her. Nathan looked at the small table, the ordinary bowls, the waitress beside his daughter, and the untouched luxury waiting outside. Then Ellie smiled at him and whispered, "Daddy, this is the first dinner that feels like home. You really want to eat in here?" Nathan asked. Ellie nodded. "Yes." "Why?" "Because Hannah eats here too." The answer was so simple that Nathan did not know what to say. A few minutes earlier, he had been prepared to take his daughter back to the dining room, apologize to the restaurant manager, and restore the carefully planned evening. Instead, he remained seated at the small kitchen table, watching Ellie dip a piece of bread into her soup while Hannah quietly finished her own meal. The kitchen moved around them with gentle rhythm. Plates clinked. A refrigerator hummed. Someone called for fresh rolls near the service window. The air smelled of roasted garlic and warm bread. Nothing about the room was luxurious, yet Ellie seemed more comfortable here than she had been in the private dining room upstairs. Nathan looked at Hannah. "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 3 years." "And you always eat in the kitchen?" Hannah smiled. "Usually. It is quieter during my break." Ellie looked at her father. "See?" Nathan almost smiled. "I see." Hannah studied him for a moment. "You do not have to stay." Nathan glanced at Ellie. "Apparently, I do." Ellie smiled into her soup. Hannah laughed softly. Then Nathan noticed something unusual. Ellie was talking, not answering questions, not giving short replies, actually talking. She told Hannah about a science project at school, a girl who had borrowed her purple markers, and a book she had been reading about space. Hannah listened without checking the clock. She did not interrupt. She did not turn the conversation toward Nathan. She simply listened. Nathan realized how rarely he had done that lately. Do you like science? Hannah asked. I like space. Why? Ellie thought for a moment. Because nobody can tell you what you are supposed to be up there. Hannah smiled. That is a good reason. Nathan looked at his daughter. He had spent years telling Ellie what she could be. A doctor if she loved medicine. An artist if she loved painting. A scientist if she loved discovery. He had wanted to make every door available to her. But perhaps he had forgotten to ask which door she actually wanted to open. What do you want to be? He asked. Ellie looked at him cautiously. Do I have to choose? Nathan shook his head. No. Then I do not know. Hannah nodded approvingly. That is allowed. Ellie grinned. Nathan watched the exchange, and something about it made his chest feel strangely tight. Hannah was not treating Ellie like a billionaire's daughter. She was not impressed by the family name. She was not trying to gain anything from the conversation. To Hannah, Ellie was simply a little girl who liked space and purple markers. Nathan had almost forgotten how freeing that could feel. Then Ellie asked Hannah a question. Do you have a family? Hannah's smile softened. I have my dad. Does he live here? No. He lives about 40 miles away. Do you see him a lot? Hannah paused. Not as much as I would like. Ellie lowered her spoon. Do you miss him? Hannah looked toward the kitchen window. Sometimes. Nathan noticed the small change in her expression. It was quiet, but unmistakable. Ellie reached across the table and pushed her bread toward Hannah. You can have mine. Hannah looked surprised. That is sweet, but you should eat it. Ellie shook her head. I have more at home. Nathan almost laughed. That is true. Hannah accepted the bread with a grateful smile. Then Ellie looked at her father. Daddy, can Hannah come to our house sometime? Nathan froze. Hannah did too. Ellie, Nathan said gently. You cannot invite people home without asking first. Ellie looked confused. I am asking. Hannah covered a smile. Nathan looked at his daughter, then at the waitress who had somehow made his child feel safe enough to invite her into their world. For the first time that evening, Nathan understood that the kitchen was not the important part. It was the fact that Ellie had found someone who made her feel seen. And Nathan was beginning to wonder why his daughter had needed a stranger to teach him how to listen. Why does Ellie feel comfortable with you when she barely speaks to me? Nathan asked. Hannah looked at him for a moment, then glanced toward the little girl still studying the dessert menu. Maybe she does speak to you, Hannah said. Maybe you are just listening for answers instead of listening for her. Nathan went quiet. The kitchen seemed suddenly louder around him. Plates moved through the service window. Silverware clinked against ceramic. Someone laughed softly near the ovens. Yet Nathan heard only that sentence. He had built $1 billion company by asking precise questions and expecting useful answers. What was the problem? What was the solution? What needed to happen next? He had brought that same instinct home after his wife died, believing that if he could organize Ellie's life carefully enough, he could protect her from grief. But grief did not follow schedules. Neither did childhood. She has barely eaten for weeks, Nathan said quietly. Hannah looked at Ellie. Does she usually eat alone? No. She eats with me. That is not what I meant. Nathan lowered his eyes. Her mother used to sit with her. Hannah understood immediately. She did not ask when Emily had died. She did not offer sympathy Nathan had heard 100 times. She simply said, then maybe dinner reminds her that someone is missing. Nathan looked toward his daughter. Ellie was tracing a tiny star on the menu with her finger. I thought she was being difficult, he admitted. Hannah's expression softened. Children are rarely difficult without a reason. I have given her everything. I believe you. Then why does it feel like I am failing her? Hannah took a slow breath. Because giving someone everything is not the same as giving them what they need. Nathan looked at her. The words were gentle, but they landed with uncomfortable precision. What does she need? Hannah glanced toward Ellie again. You should ask her. Nathan almost laughed. I have asked her. Then ask without trying to fix the answer. He stared at Hannah. You make that sound easy. It is not easy. It is just simple. Ellie suddenly looked up. Daddy. Nathan turned toward her. Yes. Are you talking about me? Hannah smiled faintly. Nathan pulled out the chair beside him. Come here. Ellie walked over and sat down. Nathan did something he rarely did. He put his phone face down on the table. He did not check the time. He did not glance toward the dining room. He did not think about the meeting waiting for him Monday morning. He simply looked at his daughter. Why have you not been eating much lately? Ellie looked at her soup. I do eat. Not much. I am not hungry. Nathan almost asked why, but stopped himself. Hannah had told him not to fix the answer. So he waited. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Ellie finally whispered. Because everybody keeps making dinner about mommy. Nathan's heart sank. What do you mean? They ask if I miss her. They tell me she would want me to be happy. They say I should be strong. Ellie looked at him. I do miss her. But sometimes I just want to eat. Nathan could not speak. Ellie continued. When we eat at home, you look at her chair. Nathan swallowed. I do, yes. And then you look at me to see if I am sad. Her voice remained small and calm. So I try not to eat because I do not want you to worry. Nathan felt the truth of it before he could defend himself. He had been watching Ellie for signs of grief, while she had been watching him for signs of fear. Two people trying so hard to protect each other that neither had felt free to simply be a father and daughter. Hannah quietly returned to her meal, giving them space. Nathan reached across the table, but stopped before touching Ellie. You do not have to make me feel better, he said. Ellie looked surprised. I do not. No, then can I be sad sometimes? Nathan's eyes softened. Yes. Can I be happy too? Always. Ellie smiled. Then she picked up her spoon and took another bite. It was such a small thing that nobody in the restaurant would have noticed. But Nathan did. He watched his daughter eat, and for the first time, he understood that healing might not begin with giving her something new. It might begin with finally allowing her to feel everything she already carried. Daddy, why is Mommy's chair still empty? Nathan froze with his hand around the edge of the kitchen table. Ellie had asked the question quietly, almost casually, but he knew better than to mistake a quiet voice for a small question. Hannah stopped eating and looked toward the little girl. Nathan followed Ellie's gaze. Even in this unfamiliar kitchen, he could see it now. Ellie had chosen a seat beside him, but she had left the chair across from them untouched. What do you mean? Nathan asked softly. Ellie pointed toward the empty chair. That one. Nathan looked at it. There is nobody sitting there. I know. Then why does it matter? Ellie lowered her eyes. Because Mommy used to sit there. The kitchen seemed to lose some of its warmth. Nathan remembered hundreds of dinners with Emily. He remembered how she always chose the same chair, how she would tuck one foot beneath herself, how she would steal a bite from his plate and pretend she had not. He remembered everything except the part that mattered most. He had stopped talking about those dinners because he thought silence would help Ellie move forward. You can talk about her, Nathan said. Ellie looked up. Really? Of course. Even if it makes you sad. Nathan hesitated. Yes. Ellie studied his face. Then why do you always change the subject? Nathan had no answer. Hannah quietly placed her spoon beside her bowl. She did not interrupt. She did not offer advice. She simply stayed there, allowing the father and daughter to have a conversation neither had known how to begin. Ellie looked at the empty chair again. Sometimes I pretend Mommy is sitting there. Nathan felt his throat tighten. What does she say? Ellie smiled faintly. She asked me about school. Nathan looked down. Does she like your science project? She thinks I should add more stars. A tiny laugh escaped him before he could stop it. Ellie smiled when she heard it. See? You remembered her. I remember everything about her. Then why do you act like we cannot talk about her? Nathan stared at the table. The answer finally came, stripped of all the polished words he used in business meetings. Because I am afraid. Ellie's expression changed. Of what? That if we talk about her too much, you will hurt more. Ellie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I already hurt. Nathan looked at her. I know. But when you pretend you are not sad, I think I have to pretend too. The words settled between them with painful honesty. Hannah glanced toward the kitchen window, giving Nathan the dignity of not being watched. Nathan looked at the empty chair. For months, he had treated grief like a room that needed to be locked. He had filled Ellie's calendar with activities, surrounded her with comfort, and planned elaborate dinners because he thought a beautiful life could somehow cover an unbearable absence. But the empty chair had never been the problem. The problem was that he had been afraid to let anyone sit beside it. Hannah finally spoke. Maybe the chair does not have to disappear. Nathan looked at her. Ellie did too. Hannah reached for a clean cloth napkin and gently placed it on the empty chair. Then it can stay. Ellie's eyes softened. For Mommy. Hannah nodded. For whoever you want to remember. Nathan looked at his daughter, then at the chair. He expected sadness to fill the room. Instead, something gentler arrived. Ellie took another bite of soup. Nathan smiled through the ache in his chest. The chair was still empty. Emily was still gone. Nothing about that truth had changed. But for the first time, Nathan understood that healing did not mean removing the empty place. Sometimes healing meant making room for the memory, sitting beside it, and discovering that love could remain without keeping a family trapped in yesterday. "There is something you should know about your mother," Hannah said, and Nathan immediately looked up. Ellie stopped stirring her soup. The kitchen seemed to quiet around them as Hannah reached into the small canvas bag beneath her chair and carefully pulled out an old photograph. "Where did you get that?" Nathan asked. Hannah held the photograph toward him. "Your wife gave it to me." Nathan stared at the image. Emily stood beneath a faded red awning outside the restaurant, younger than he remembered her, smiling beside a group of children holding paper plates. Ellie leaned closer. "That is Mommy." "Yes," Hannah said softly. "She came here several times before you and I ever met." Nathan took the photograph carefully. His fingers remained still around its edges. Why would Emily come here? She volunteered with a neighborhood meal program. Sometimes she helped prepare food. Sometimes she just sat with people. Nathan looked at the photograph again. "She never told me." Hannah gave a small smile. Maybe she did not think it was important. Ellie pointed at the corner of the picture. "Who is that?" Hannah glanced down. "That is me." Nathan looked sharply at her. Hannah was much younger in the photograph, perhaps a teenager, standing near Emily with a paper plate in her hands. "You knew her?" Nathan asked. "A little." "How little?" "Enough to remember what she was like when nobody important was watching." Nathan slowly lowered the photograph. The sentence carried no accusation, yet it made him uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" Hannah looked toward Ellie. "Your mother liked this kitchen because people stopped pretending back here." Ellie frowned. "Pretending what?" Hannah smiled gently. "Pretending they had everything figured out." Nathan looked around the room. The scratched table, the stacked dishes, the old coffee machine, the whiteboard filled with handwritten orders. Nothing here was polished. Nothing was designed to impress anyone. And suddenly he understood why Emily had loved it. "She said something to me once," Hannah continued. "She said, 'The kitchen is where people stop pretending.'" Nathan closed his eyes for a second. He could hear Emily saying it. Her voice, her laugh, the way she used to tell him that he took everything too seriously. Ellie looked between them. "What else did Mommy say?" Hannah thought carefully. "She said she hoped you would let your daughter become whoever she wanted to become." Nathan looked at Ellie. "She said that?" "Yes." "When?" Hannah hesitated. "Years ago." Ellie looked at her father. "Did Mommy talk about me?" "All the time." Ellie smiled. Nathan did not. He was staring at the photograph, realizing something painful and beautiful at once. Emily had known Hannah before Hannah became a waitress. Hannah had known Emily before Ellie was old enough to remember her. Their worlds had touched quietly, long before Nathan understood there was a connection. "Why did you never tell me?" Nathan asked. Hannah met his eyes. "Because I did not think it was my story to tell." Nathan was silent. That answer stayed with him. Hannah could have used Emily's name to make herself important. She could have told Nathan everything the moment she recognized him. Instead, she had waited until Ellie needed the truth. There was dignity in that restraint. Ellie reached for the photograph. "Can I hold it?" Nathan passed it to her. She studied her mother's face for several seconds. Then she noticed something written on the back. "Daddy, there are words." Nathan turned the photograph over. In Emily's handwriting were only a few lines. "Remember this place. People do not need perfect lives. They need someone willing to sit beside them." Nathan read it twice. Then a third time. Hannah watched quietly. Ellie looked at her father. "Did Mommy write that for us?" Nathan could not answer immediately. He looked at the small table, the empty chair, the old photograph, and the waitress who had unknowingly brought a forgotten piece of his family back into the light. Finally, he nodded. Maybe she did. Ellie smiled. And Nathan realized that the woman he had spent years trying to remember had just been described perfectly by the one person who had never tried to make her memory beautiful. Hannah simply remembered her as she was. Kind, ordinary, generous, and real. "Daddy, what if Mommy wanted you to stop being sad?" Ellie asked, and Nathan looked at her as though the question had opened a door he had been afraid to touch. The old photograph still rested between them on the kitchen table. Hannah had returned to her work, but she remained close enough to hear if either of them needed her. Nathan looked at Emily's handwriting again. Remember this place. People do not need perfect lives. They need someone willing to sit beside them. I do not know if your mother wanted me to stop being sad, Nathan said. Ellie tilted her head. Then what do you think she wanted? Nathan breathed slowly. I think she wanted us to keep living. Ellie considered that. Living means eating soup. Nathan smiled. Sometimes. And sitting in kitchens? Apparently. Ellie smiled back. For the first time, the memory of Emily did not feel like a locked room. It felt like a window opening. Nathan turned toward Hannah. How did you know what Ellie needed? Hannah paused while arranging clean plates. I did not. You seemed to. I only listened. Nathan looked down. I should have known that. Hannah shook her head. You were trying to protect her. I was trying to protect both of us. Hannah gave him a gentle look. That is different. Nathan leaned back in the worn chair. He had spent years believing protection meant removing every difficult thing from Ellie's path. If she was lonely, he planned an activity. If she was sad, he bought something special. If she missed her mother, he arranged a distraction. He had never considered that sometimes love meant sitting beside someone while the sadness remained. I think I have been doing something wrong, Nathan said. Ellie immediately looked at him. Are you going to be in trouble? Nathan laughed softly. No. I am just realizing I could have done better. Ellie looked relieved. That is okay. Why? Because you can do better tomorrow. Hannah smiled. Nathan looked at his daughter. 8 years old, and somehow she had just offered him the simplest form of grace. You know what I thought a good father was? Nathan asked. Rich, Ellie said. Hannah covered a laugh. Nathan smiled. No, although that did become part of it. Ellie waited. I thought a good father was someone who could solve problems. Can you solve everything? No. Then you are not a very good father. Nathan raised his eyebrows. Hannah laughed openly this time. Ellie giggled. I am joking. I hope so. Nathan looked at her, then lowered his voice. But you are right about something. I cannot solve everything. Ellie reached for another piece of bread. You can listen. Nathan nodded. I can listen. The words were simple, but they felt like a promise. Then Ellie looked at Hannah. Did Mommy ever talk about Daddy? Hannah hesitated. Nathan noticed. It is okay, he said. You can tell us. Hannah slowly sat down again. She told me that your father loved you very much. Nathan's expression changed. His own father had been gone for years, and Emily had rarely spoken about him. What else? Hannah looked at the photograph. She said you were always trying to become the kind of man your father would have been proud of. Nathan stared at the table. That was true. More true than he wanted to admit. He had built the company, accumulated the money, and created a life where Ellie would never need to worry about anything. Somewhere along the way, he had confused security with happiness. Ellie reached for his hand. Daddy, yes. You do not have to be perfect. Nathan looked at her small fingers wrapped around his. Who told you that? Ellie glanced toward Hannah. She did not. I just know. Nathan smiled. Outside the kitchen, the restaurant continued its busy Friday night. Orders were called. Guests laughed. Glasses clinked. But inside that little room, Nathan felt something quiet settle into place. He did not need another plan. He did not need another expensive dinner. He needed to stay. So he turned his phone completely off, moved his chair closer to Ellie, and listened as she began telling him about the stars she wanted to paint on her bedroom ceiling. For once, Nathan did not interrupt with a solution. He simply listened. And somewhere between the first star and the last, the billionaire father began learning how to be a father again. Daddy, can we come back here next Friday? Ellie asked, and Nathan looked at her across the kitchen table. You mean the restaurant? No. The kitchen. Hannah glanced over from the counter, surprised. Nathan smiled. I think we can arrange that. Ellie brightened immediately. It had been only a few days since that first dinner, but something had changed. Nathan had begun noticing small things he once overlooked. Ellie talked more during breakfast. She asked questions during the drive to school. She told him when she was sad instead of pretending everything was fine. Most importantly, Nathan had stopped rushing to fill every silence. He listened. Sometimes the change felt almost too simple to believe. On Friday evening, they returned to the restaurant. Nathan wore a dark blue sweater instead of his usual business suit, and Ellie carried a small notebook covered with silver stars. Hannah was already working when they arrived. You came back, she said. I told you we would, Ellie replied. I did not know if you would actually remember. I remember everything important, Ellie said proudly. Nathan looked at Hannah. Apparently, I have been informed that this is an important place. Hannah smiled. It has its moments. Ellie immediately pulled Nathan toward the kitchen table. I brought something. She opened her notebook and showed Hannah a drawing of the restaurant kitchen. There was the long counter, the coffee machine, the shelves, and 3 people sitting around the little table. Nathan pointed at himself. Why did you make my head so big? Ellie shrugged. Because you have a big head. Hannah laughed. Nathan shook his head. I walked into that one. Ellie, turn the page. The next drawing showed a night sky filled with stars. Beneath it were 3 small figures holding hands. That is us, Ellie explained. Hannah looked at the drawing carefully. Why are there 3? Ellie smiled. Because you are part of the story now. Hannah became quiet. Nathan noticed the change immediately. Ellie, he said gently. People can be part of our story without staying forever. Ellie frowned. Why would Hannah not stay? Hannah looked at Nathan, then back at Ellie. I did not say I was leaving. But something in her expression told Nathan there was more to the sentence. Later, while Ellie helped arrange napkins, Nathan quietly asked Hannah, Is everything okay? Hannah hesitated. My father has been having a difficult time. Nathan waited. He lives about 40 miles away, she continued. I have been trying to visit him more often, but my schedule makes it difficult. Nathan nodded. You could take time off. Hannah smiled. That is kind, but time off does not solve everything. What would? A job closer to him. Nathan understood. There were dozens of ways he could solve that problem immediately. He could make a phone call. He could offer money. He could arrange an opportunity before Hannah even finished explaining. For a moment, the old Nathan almost returned. Then he remembered Ellie's words. Questions are not the same as listening. What do you want to do? He asked. Hannah looked surprised. I do not know yet. Nathan nodded. Then you do not have to decide tonight. Hannah studied him. You are different. Nathan gave a small smile. My daughter has been giving me lessons. Across the room, Ellie called. Daddy, you forgot the napkins. I am coming. Nathan turned, then stopped. Actually, I am staying right here. Ellie smiled. Nathan walked over and sat beside her. No phone. No assistant. No business calls. Just a table, a stack of napkins, and his daughter explaining very seriously why every napkin needed to be folded exactly the same way. Hannah watched them for a moment. Then she quietly returned to work. The evening moved gently around them. Later, Ellie rested her head against Nathan's arm and asked, Can we do this every week? Nathan looked at her. If you want. I do. He smiled. Then we will. He did not promise expensive dinners or perfect weekends. He promised something much smaller and much harder to replace. He would show up. And in the quiet warmth of that kitchen, Nathan began to understand that being present was not the grand gesture he had once imagined. It was the ordinary choice he could make again and again. Daddy, Hannah is going to leave, isn't she? Ellie asked, and Nathan immediately knew she had heard more than they intended. He looked across the kitchen at Hannah, who had stopped arranging clean plates. Why would you think that? Nathan asked. Ellie lowered her voice. Because you were talking about her dad. Nathan pulled out the chair beside him. Come sit with me. Ellie sat down, watching his face carefully. Hannah may need to find work closer to her family, Nathan explained. Does that mean she cannot work here anymore? Maybe. Ellie frowned. But I want her to stay. Nathan understood the feeling. He wanted Hannah to stay too, although for reasons he had only recently begun to understand. She had become part of the rhythm of their Friday evenings. She listened to Ellie. She respected the empty chair. She had helped Nathan see that grief did not need to be hidden behind comfort and expensive distractions. But wanting someone to stay did not mean having the right to make them stay. We cannot decide for Hannah, Nathan said. Ellie looked disappointed. But you can do anything. Nathan smiled gently. No, I can buy many things. That is different. Hannah turned toward them. Your father is right. Ellie crossed her arms. That is not fair. Sometimes fair means letting people choose, Hannah said. Ellie looked down at the notebook filled with stars. Nathan remembered what Hannah had told him earlier. Her father lived about 40 miles away. She wanted to be closer to him, but she did not want anyone treating her like a problem that needed to be solved. Nathan could have offered her money. He could have created a position at one of his companies. He could have made a single phone call and changed the direction of her life. 6 months ago, he would have called that generosity. Tonight, it felt dangerously close to control. Hannah, Nathan said, if you could choose any kind of work near your father, what would you want? Hannah looked surprised. I have not figured that out. Then take your time. You are not going to offer me a job? Would you want me to? Hannah considered the question. Not unless I ask. Nathan nodded. Then I will not. Ellie looked between them. That is it. That is it. Hannah smiled. Thank you. Nathan understood that the words meant more than gratitude. They meant respect. The next morning, Nathan sat at his desk overlooking downtown Chicago with Hannah's situation still on his mind. His assistant placed a stack of documents beside him. You have a meeting in 20 minutes, she said. Nathan nodded, then looked at the papers. For years, his instinct had been to act quickly. Problems appeared. He solved them. People asked. He provided. It had built his company and shaped his identity. But now he was learning that not every problem belonged to him. Not every person needed rescuing. Sometimes grace meant offering a door and allowing someone else to decide whether to walk through it. Nathan made one phone call, but not to Hannah. He contacted a respected community restaurant 40 miles from Chicago that supported local families and asked whether they were hiring experienced waitstaff. He gave them Hannah's name only after asking whether she would be comfortable with an introduction. Then he stopped. No promises. No pressure. No hidden conditions. When Nathan told Hannah that evening, she stared at him. You found a place? I found a possibility. And you did not tell them to hire me? No, Hannah smiled. Why not? Nathan looked toward Ellie, who was drawing stars on a paper napkin. Because I finally understand that helping someone does not mean taking away their choice. Hannah was quiet for several seconds. Then she nodded. Your daughter really is teaching you a lot. Nathan smiled. She has an excellent teacher. Ellie looked up. Who? Nathan pointed toward Hannah. Ellie smiled proudly. Then she returned to her drawing. Hannah looked at Nathan, and for a moment neither spoke. The kitchen hummed softly around them. Somewhere beyond the swinging door, plates moved and customers talked. But Nathan noticed something different in himself. He no longer felt the desperate need to control the ending. He could care about Hannah without possessing her future. He could be grateful without demanding that she remain. And he could love his daughter without trying to protect her from every difficult goodbye. Ellie suddenly held up her napkin. Look. Nathan leaned closer. What is it? 3 stars. Hannah smiled. Why 3? Ellie answered without hesitation. Because some people are meant to help you find your way home. Nathan looked at Hannah. She looked back at him. Neither needed to explain what Ellie meant. For once, the quiet was enough. Daddy, I think I found our kitchen. Ellie stood beneath the doorway of a small community restaurant 40 miles from Chicago, holding Nathan's hand with one hand and her Silver Star notebook with the other. Nathan looked inside and smiled. It was not the polished restaurant where they had first met Hannah. There were no crystal glasses, no private dining rooms, and no expensive paintings on the walls. There were simple wooden tables, warm yellow lights, handwritten menus, and the comforting smell of fresh bread drifting from the kitchen. Then Ellie saw her. Hannah. Hannah turned from the counter and froze. For one beautiful second, nobody moved. Then Ellie ran toward her, and Hannah opened her arms with a smile that reached all the way to her eyes. You came, Hannah whispered. We said we would, Ellie answered. Nathan walked behind her at an easier pace, carrying the small canvas bag Ellie had packed that morning. Inside were her notebook, a box of colored pencils, and the old photograph of Emily. Hannah looked at Nathan. You actually came all this way? Ellie insisted. That is not true, Ellie said. Daddy wanted to come too. Nathan raised his eyebrows. I did. Ellie nodded. You smiled in the car. Hannah laughed. Nathan looked around the room. I suppose I did. It had been 3 months since Hannah left the original restaurant. She had accepted the position at the community restaurant after meeting the manager and deciding for herself that it was right for her. Her father lived nearby now, and Hannah could visit him several evenings each week. Nothing had been forced. Nothing had been purchased. Nathan had simply opened a door and respected her choice. Ellie had missed her terribly, so Nathan had promised they would visit when school allowed. Now, as they stood together in that warm little restaurant, he realized the promise had become something more. It was proof that distance did not have to mean disappearance. Hannah led them toward a table near the kitchen. Ellie immediately noticed the empty chair. She stopped. That one. Nathan followed her gaze. What about it? It is empty. Hannah smiled. Then we have room. Ellie looked at Nathan. For Mommy. Nathan felt the familiar ache, but it no longer frightened him. He nodded. For Mommy. Hannah placed a clean napkin on the chair. Ellie gently set the old photograph beside it. The three of them sat down. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Ellie opened her notebook. I made something for you. Hannah leaned closer. Ellie turned the page. It was a drawing of the old restaurant kitchen, the little table, the empty chair, and 3 stars shining above them. Beneath the drawing, she had written 4 words in careful blue letters. People can feel like home. Hannah covered her mouth for a moment. Nathan looked away, giving her privacy. He remembered the first night he had found Ellie in that kitchen. He remembered the expensive dinner left untouched. He remembered how certain he had been that he knew what his daughter needed. Now he understood how little he had known. Money had given Ellie comfort. It had given her opportunities, beautiful homes, wonderful schools, and every material thing he could provide. But none of those things could replace a person who sat beside her and listened. None could replace a father who put away his phone and stayed. None could erase the empty chair, either. But the chair no longer represented only loss. It represented love that had survived change. Hannah returned the photograph to Ellie. Your mother would have loved this. Ellie smiled. She already helped us make it. Nathan looked at his daughter. I think you are right. Hannah glanced toward the kitchen. Are you too hungry? Ellie immediately raised her hand. Yes. Nathan laughed. That is the fastest answer you have given all week. Because this is real food. You had pancakes this morning. Those were different. Hannah laughed as she stood. Then I know exactly what you need. Ellie followed her toward the kitchen, then stopped and looked back at Nathan. Daddy, yes. Are you coming? Nathan looked at the table. He looked at the photograph. He looked at his watch, then slowly removed it and placed it beside his phone. I am coming. Ellie smiled. Nathan walked into the kitchen and sat beside her. Hannah brought 3 bowls of soup and a basket of warm bread. Nothing about the meal was extraordinary. It was not expensive. It was not perfect. It was simply warm, honest, and shared. Nathan watched Ellie talk to Hannah about school while the evening lights softened against the windows. He thought about Emily. He thought about the empty chair. He thought about the man he had been and the father he was still becoming. Then Ellie reached for his hand beneath the table. Nathan squeezed it gently. No grand announcement followed. No fortune was given away. No one needed to prove anything. There was only the quiet sound of 3 people eating together, with one empty chair holding a memory that no longer had to be hidden. Nathan finally understood what Emily had meant. People did not need perfect lives. They needed someone willing to sit beside them. And as his daughter smiled across the table, the billionaire father realized that the greatest thing he could ever give her was not a perfect life. It was his presence inside the imperfect one.